Hey, I'm Alicia Newcomb, and this is Assembly Guide, your guide to assembling and organizing as we work to make change in our theatrical industry. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Assembly Guide. Alicia Newcomb here. My pronouns are she, her. I'm your host. Thanks for joining me again today. Today's episode is a 101 to getting involved with Actors Equity Association. Are you a professional actor or stage manager who wants to get more involved with Actors Equity and you don't quite know where to start? This episode is for you. In this episode, I'm going to break down a 101 to getting involved with our union, Actors Equity Association, the union that represents professional actors and stage managers. And I'm breaking this down from my own perspective as a member myself, not from staff, not from a counselor. I don't represent Actors Equity Association in any way, just representing myself. I'm a member who only a few years ago was frustrated with the state of our industry and what I felt as a lack of substantial change driven by our union that's supposed to protect us. I too was frustrated, feeling hopeless, and also simultaneously like I had to do something, but I didn't know where to start. And by finding my own way, and with the help of others who also found their own way, I'm happy to share a solid path forward if you want to get involved with our union and be a part of changing it and therefore changing our industry. A few episodes moving forward are going to be directly related to Actors Equity. Change is applicable to everyone, and I really want this podcast to be applicable to everyone who want to see better protections for workers. And also, I have the unique ability to speak to actors and stage managers specifically. And I want to do that, to provide actual tools and pathways forward in our industry to help contribute to the changes that we want to see. So, some episodes moving forward are going to be a little bit less generic and a little bit more specific to Actors Equity Union members, as that's my lived experience. Write what you know, right? So, today's episode is the 101 of getting involved with the union. But not everyone makes change the same way, and we shouldn't expect them to. So the next episode after this, 2 weeks from now, will be, I don't quite want to get involved, but I'm working a contract. What are the basic things I should be doing? I'm also planning on making an I'm angry and I want things to change, what should I do episode. So if either of those sound more like your pace, stay tuned. But today we're going to start here. A 101 to getting involved with Actors Equity Association. I'm going to start off with some general reminders. So, you're someone who wants to get more involved with equity, but you don't know where to start. First, congratulations, that's really cool. Paying attention and knowing something's wrong is the first step in making actual change. However, that's where most people stop. I heard a lot of frustrations from people within our industry, within our union, specifically after negotiations in the process of sharing the tentative agreement with members and leading up to the ratification vote. And that's great because a lot of people know that things need to be better in our industry. But most people stop there. They stop at what I call step one, which is becoming aware. I think my second episode ever was my personal 7-step process that I've kind of navigated as I approach change. And step one is becoming aware. And that's where a lot of people stop. But there's like 6 more steps that I've identified. I'm sure there's way more, but in my own process before we make actual change. And those include listening and digesting, fact-finding, looking for others, identifying the power holders, and strategizing your path forward, and then finally action. So if you're at step 1 and you're aware something's wrong, but you don't really know where to go, congrats. That's great. We have to realize something's wrong before we make change. And the fact that you're wanting to do something about it means you're ahead of where most people actually are at. Something really important in this conversation to remember is also acknowledging imposter syndrome. It's so important that we talk about it. And that is kind of the fear that we think we have to know something fully and be an authority on it before we speak on it or before we act on it. And I want to say we all feel this. And it's absolutely not true. You do not have to be an authority on something before you begin to advocate. If that were the case, I feel like very few of us would ever be able to advocate on anything. There's so many things in the world that need to change. We have to acknowledge and let go of the feeling that we have to be an authority on something before we can speak on this. I felt this. This is what I felt in my own journey into stepping into advocating for change in our union. I felt this as a deputy. I signed up to be deputy in my building, and I knew nothing about the contracts that we were working. I thought I did. And then in the process of being deputy, I learned more about them. But I felt this. If I let that fear stop me from doing anything, I would not be where I am today. I would not have been a part of the bargaining team for the last production contract cycle. I would not have put forward multiple proposals to creating change in our contracts. I wouldn't have done any of that. So just a reminder, imposter syndrome is a feeling. It's very real, but that does not mean it is true. Perfection is the enemy of good. It's the enemy of change. We have to acknowledge we're not going to be an authority figure, which is why we should always be open to learning. We're going to make mistakes, and we have to expect both of those things to be true for us to move forward. We're not going to be the best at everything we attempt, and we're not going to know the answers. We're going to have to ask questions. You're not alone. We all feel this, every single one of us. So let's acknowledge that and continue forward. My goal for this episode is to share actual pathways and tools for you as you navigate getting more involved with the union. And I'm going to talk least involved to most involved of the pathways that I'm putting forward today. Now, all of these steps are going to take a little bit of effort. They're all very important. And I think if we try to attempt them all, we get overwhelmed. So buckle up, listen up, see if anything is calling your name as a way that you can easily get involved, and try that pathway and see how it goes. But starting least involved to most involved, here's the basics of engaging with Actors Equity Association, in my personal opinion. Something really important that you can do that isn't super involved regarding the level of effort you have to put in is that you can vote in Actors Equity Association elections. Yes, it is annoying. Yes, it is involved, but it is super important. You're usually notified of Actors Equity Association elections via email. If you're not getting emails, feel free to contact Actors Equity and let them know you're not receiving emails. You can also check on your member profile on your account on the portal whether or not you've opted out of receiving emails. You should opt back in. I know the emails are annoying. I know our union needs to deliver information in broader, more engaging, a wider variety of ways. And right now, we get emails, and they're really important to read when you have the capacity to do so. So when elections are coming up, you can and should vote. They are frustrating because there's not often a lot of information available on the candidates. Usually, when it's time for elections, there is information on Equity's member portal. I'm sure when the time comes for elections, I will direct you to where that is located. Here's how I research for elections. I go to the member portal, I look at the information that's there, and then I usually look people up on Instagram. I look people up on the internet. Some candidates release statements on YouTube via video. You have to put a little bit of work in, but you can and should, because it's really important to understand what our elected representatives think, what they're saying, and what they think should change. So if you do a little bit of digging in, you can find information out about people. And you should pay attention to that and vote accordingly for representatives who are going to advocate on behalf of the change that you want to see in our union. Another thing that you can do that's a pretty low engagement level is report to your business and field representatives and fill out surveys when they are sent to you from Equity. And I'm going to start with reporting to business reps first. Even if things are contractually allowed or contractually fine, if you don't like what's happening on your contract, tell your business rep. If you don't like the things that we're allowed to do within our contract, tell your business rep. They log and they track data. The business reps receive feedback from members like you when you report to them. whether that's via phone, via email. They take that information and they log it. And patterns are going to stand out. So, for example, if everyone is angry about the amount of 5-show weekends that we're allowed to work, but only 5 people talk to their business reps or put it on surveys because we assume it's not going to change because that's just the way things are, it will never be a priority to change. If everyone is telling business reps that we do way too many 5-show weekends in a calendar year, business reps are going to hear that from everyone, and then they're going to say to the bargaining team when it's time, and to the committees that govern the contracts, hey, members are telling us they're doing way too many 5-show weekends. They don't like it. Their job is not only to enforce things that are happening that aren't allowed by contract. It's also to advise people within the union who are on contract committees, on bargaining teams, of the things that members are saying, hey, we know this is allowed. We don't like it. We don't want to do that. We want this to change. So tell your business reps, even if it's allowed by contract, if there's something you don't like, let your union know. Proposals and negotiations, so proposals for bargaining teams and that are in the proposal package that the union puts forward across the table for any of the union contracts, are based directly on member input and member priorities. As a member of the bargaining team for the production contract in the last cycle, I can say, when you are a member of the bargaining team, you agree, you essentially take an oath to abide by advocating on behalf of members, on behalf of what members want to prioritize. So I'm not myself, Alicia, on the bargaining team speaking about the things that I want to see change personally, and that alone. I'm speaking on behalf of what members have told the union. So just like you report to business reps, something that is equally as important is filling out surveys when the union sends them to you. And that goes back to reading emails. Surveys come to you as a member in emails from Actors Equity Association. And members fill out the surveys or they don't. But I do want to say, as a member of the bargaining team, I read every single word and piece of information that was shared with us as members of the bargaining team from the member surveys. And all of that information that is filled out on a survey is taken by staff and it is made anonymous. So any sort of show affiliation or things like that are taken out, to my understanding, so that no one's going to know who filled out the survey, but we do have what you said. And there's lots of information on there that is easily able to be put together and then put into a chart or some sort of table where we can see what member priorities are. And this was pretty new for the last production contract survey, but the 3 tri-chairs of the production committee, Ann McPherson, Jacqueline Gerald, and Kristen Beth Williams, collaborated with staff to ask for more open-ended responses so that us, the members, as we fill out the surveys, can not only click a pre-written response, but we can write specifically what we want to say. And like I said, we received every single one of those responses and we read them all. The members of the team read every single word that you write. So fill those responses out. Fill them out thoroughly and tell your union how you want things to change. And I'm saying this again with the gentle reminder that even if it's allowed by contract, if you want to see it change, let your union know. Something you can also easily do is talk to people, talk to coworkers about what you want to see change. Do you have friends in the industry? Do you have friends in the industry working the same contract as you? Start to talk to each other about what you want to see change. Here's an example. I first started getting more involved with the union around 4 years ago. This was around the time that the last contract, so not the most recent production contract that was ratified, but the cycle before that, was at the bargaining table. And they were meeting with various shows to talk about what was in their package. And that's when I kind of started tuning in for the first time. And I tuned in and I was shocked to hear that there was basically no mention of scheduling in the package that was being put forward. To me, that was a huge issue because shows should not be allowed to do more than 8 performances in a row. I've talked about this in previous episodes. And I was blown away that that was not something the team was bringing forward. When I brought that up in a meeting, I was told that that was not a member priority at the time. Not enough people had told the union that they wanted to see scheduling change in any way at all, and therefore it was not a part of the package being brought to the table by the bargaining team. And that made me angry because as someone who worked a show at that moment in time and has worked many shows, I feel like excessive scheduling is a massive issue that needs to be curtailed, that needs to stop. So I spent the 4 years after that talking very publicly around my workspace with friends in the industry and also openly on social media with both my voice and my writing about how much excessive scheduling is an issue. And by doing that, I had a lot of people actually reach out to me and say, oh my gosh, this happens at our building too. Or like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize this happened so much. And because of that, people started to talk about how much this is an issue. And guess what was in the bargaining package 4 years later? Scheduling adjustments. So I'm not saying that was just me, but I am saying that the more that we talk about change with the people also doing the same type of work, you'll likely find that there are other people around you who want the same thing to change. And you all have to talk about it on surveys, in official equity spaces, by reporting to your business reps for the union to hear that that is a pattern, that that is something that is widely thought and widely felt across the union, and that that is something that members want to see change. If we don't talk about it, the union will not hear about it, and it will not be reflected in the future bargaining packages or the future contracts that we achieve. Something else that's very minimally involved that you can do to get involved with our union is to follow We Are Stage Left on Instagram. Look at the people who ran and were elected from We Are Stage Left. A lot of them speak very frequently on social media about the union and helping share information about the union, including when different meetings are happening, including when is a great time to report to your committee chairs or your business reps. Follow those voices. And if you don't know what We Are Stage Left is, it was a group of people running for council last election who campaigned together, as I'm quoting from their Instagram, committed to fostering artistic growth and promoting equity within the performing arts community. Many of these people got elected, and many of them are doing great work within our union, and I can say that from having observed several council spaces to advocate for the changes that I personally want to see, and I imagine many people want to see in our union. So follow the voices who are running for union spaces. Follow We Are Stage Left. You can see many of them from there, and you can branch out on Instagram accordingly. Now I'm going to talk about ways to get involved that are slightly more active. So these involve a little bit more effort, but I think they're very approachable. And to hopefully make them more approachable, I made a manual. This is something I'm hoping to use for many future episodes. I wanted to make a very user-friendly tool that gives you step-by-step instructions that are super clear and concise for doing different things that I'm breaking down within this episode. So I'm going to attach that to the show notes. It's also on my webpage for my podcast at the very bottom. You'll see it say Assembly Guide Manuals, and you will be able to click there for the manual that you want to see. So the manual for this episode is going to talk you through every single step that you need to follow on the member portal to do the things that I'm talking about. So I'm going to try and keep the instructions out of my summary as I talk about these things, and just know that tool is there for you if you want it. Something that you can do is start learning the contract that you're working. You can find that contract on the member portal. You can find any contract on the member portal. And I'm going to say when you pull up the contract, it'll feel a little overwhelming. It's a massive document. And some contracts aren't fully available yet, and there's reasons for that. For example, the production contract used to be production and touring. But in the cycle previous to the most recent one, those books were separated and touring became its own contract, its own CBA. And because of the separation of the two, and because of the fact that for a long time, our contracts, especially the production contract, only said actors with a capital A when talking about actors and stage managers altogether. Well, that's not helpful. They are different job categories and they have specific needs. The language is having to be finalized to separate and specify actors and stage managers as opposed to just actors, which is something we want because our union represents actors and stage managers. It's also something that takes time because just like everything else, the Broadway League continues to push back on nuance and things that we as a union, to my understanding, again, speaking on my own behalf, reasonably understood that these protections should be for actors and stage managers. The Broadway League is sometimes pushing back on things and saying, oh, that's not for stage managers. So that's an issue. Because again, stage managers are extremely underprotected and underrepresented in our contracts. But that's a reason you don't see the full production CBA on the portal. But you can look at the changes. You can, when you look in the document library that I will have explained in the manual, you can pull up any contract. If the contract's not available, you can pull up the most recent changes achieved in bargaining, and future contracts will be uploaded there as well. Start to understand the contract you're working. Here's an approachable way to do that. Chunk it down. Take a section and read one section a week. It's going to be confusing. It's not going to make sense. Ask questions to staff. Call equity and they'll connect you with the right person to answer your questions. You can contact your business representatives, your field representatives, which I explain thoroughly in the manual how to contact them and find who your reps are. Talk to them, ask those questions. They will answer them for you or point you in the right direction, but begin to understand the contract that you're working. It's really hard to know what we need to change if we don't know where the contract language is currently at. To understand what business representatives and field representatives are, I'm going to say business representatives typically do contract enforcement. The field representatives handle safety issues, safe and sanitary conditions in the workplace. They monitor shows that are in production. They do venue visits to inspect theaters and facilities. They determine which actors are performing as principals or chorus and parts or specialties. So if anything is in that world, the field representative is going to be who you want. Otherwise, it's probably the business representative. Another great way to learn the contract you're working is to be a deputy. Deputies are elected within the company. Volunteer to be a deputy. It's okay if you know nothing about it. I knew nothing about it when I volunteered to be deputy. Your job is basically just to be the liaison between the company members and the union. So if anyone has a question, they can ask you to contact equity to find the answer. If there's an emergency, you handle contacting equity and you handle reporting what's going on so that equity can help. Again, like I said, when I became deputy, I did not know anything. It's through being deputy that I was able to start learning the contract, to start connecting with equity and trying to understand the rules. And it was a frustrating process because when I had conversations with staff about elements of our contract, they explained to me, and this was frequently the response that I got, because a lot of times the rules are not where we want them to be. And producers tend to do the bare minimum. Again, not all producers, but a lot of them. So staff frequently was explaining to me that while they totally understood why I was frustrated with an issue or why a member was frustrated with an issue, that our union cannot enforce beyond the rules of the contract. So if someone's doing the bare minimum, but it's still contractually allowed, our union can't do anything about it. That's how I started to understand that the rules are way behind where we want them to go, and a lot of them needed to change. If you're interested in understanding your contract, being a deputy is a great way to kind of get to do that, and you should give it a shot. Another way you can get involved is to observe official equity spaces. And we're going to talk about meetings. Equity's National Council meets every third Tuesday of every month, usually with the exception of holidays, and it's typically from 1 to 5 p.m. Put that in your calendar right now. Give yourself a reminder. Doesn't mean you have to go every week, but you'll just know that in case you have that Tuesday free, you can check it out. If you want to observe an equity meeting, you have to email governance@actorsequity.org with your member name and your member ID number and the meeting you want to observe. You have to email every time you want to observe a meeting. If you email for one council meeting, that doesn't mean you're automatically invited to observe every meeting. And governance has to approve you. So that has to be done at least 24 hours in advance of whatever meeting you want to observe. That's when council meetings happen. You can see your elected councilors as well as the executive team. And sometimes you hear senior staff on those meetings. Check it out. See what people are saying. There's also committee meetings. So, an introduction to committees. Committees essentially carry out the work of Actors Equity Association. They each focus on particular aspects of union business. Start to understand what committees affect and govern the contracts that you work and the work that you do. Committees are organized by things like contract type, like region. So, for example, there's a TYA committee, that's essentially like youth theater. There's a LORT committee, that's League of Resident Theaters. There's NEAT, which is the New England Area Theaters. There's a production committee, which governs the production contract. There's touring committee. There's an off-Broadway committee. Committees are also based on the type of work. For example, there's a principal committee. There's the ACCA, which is the Advisory Committee on Chorus Affairs. It's basically a fancy way of saying it is the chorus committee for chorus workers. There's an actor instrumentalist committee. There's a stage manager committee. And some committees also have various focuses, like the Committee to Prevent Harassment in Hostile Work Environments. There's a Media and New Technology Committee. There's an Equal Employment Opportunity Committee, whose job is essentially implementing EDI within union business and contracts and increasing employment opportunities for members with protected characteristics. So, as you can kind of hear in that description, committees are based on a lot of different things, and a lot of them intersect. And the work that you do might be reflected in multiple committees. For example, I am usually an ensemble worker. So I would be represented by the ACCA, the chorus committee, and most recently I worked production contract. So I would also be represented by the production contract. I've also worked tour. So I could also speak to my experience in the touring committee or to the touring committee. There are also counselor-only committees like National Public Policy and Organizing, but for this purposes of this podcast, we're not going to worry about that. Committees have meetings too, just like council. But each committee has different rules. It's up to the chair of the committee, and the chair of the committee is always an elected counselor, as to how those meetings go. Some chairs of some committees allow visitors, observers of committee meetings to speak. Some do not. I've never run into a committee chair who will not allow observers, but I think essentially it's up to the committee chair if they do that. Now, if you want to know when committee meetings are happening, you should contact the chair of the committee and refer to my manual for how to find the chair of every committee and how to contact them. But that's who you want to contact. You could also probably email governance and ask when a specific committee meeting is happening. I imagine they can point you in the right direction. So you can observe any of those, given the chair of the committee approves observers, by emailing governance@actorsequity.org. Speaking of committee chairs, it's important to understand who the people with the capacity to actually create and push change within our union are. In my second episode, I talk about understanding who has the power, because if we talk about the change we want to see with those people, those changes are more likely to happen. as opposed to just talking to someone who has no ability to create or advocate for that type of change. Be strategic about who you speak to. That's another way that you can get involved in our union. Be strategic about who you're talking to about the changes that you want to see. So if you're looking to make contract changes, committee chairs, who are elected counselors, which is why elections are important, run the bargaining teams for every type of contract. There's always a union lawyer. There's always a lead negotiator who is our executive director, Al Vincent Jr., who is fantastic and has lots of experience with various labor unions. But the committee chairs are responsible for building the bargaining teams, and they also have a very strong say because they typically lead those teams. So if you want something to change in your contract, email the committee chairs with what you want to see change. Sometimes, as we talked about how committees overlap, this might be more than one committee and or more than one committee chair. For example, the production committee has 3 co-chairs. And if I want something to change and it's reflective of the ensemble work that I do on a production contract, I would contact the production committee chairs, the ACCA chair, which is basically the chorus committee chair. Or if you were a principal worker and you wanted something to change, you would email the principal committee chair and the production committee chair. Or if you're working at a LORT contract, you would email the LORT chair. These are who you should contact if you want to see things changed via an applicable committee or a contract that you're working. You should also email business reps about what you think should change. Just like how we previously talked about, business reps track this data and they advise equity and the committees and the committee chairs on what members are saying they want to see change. So while you're sending that email to those committee chairs, why don't you go ahead and CC your business rep? You can also add other applicable staff, like a safety field rep. For example, PT is monitored by the member safety team. So the member safety field reps are those who handle issues with PT while people are working contracts. So if I feel like I'm not having enough physical therapy for my show, I'm going to email my business rep, a member safety field rep, or the head of member safety, my committee chairs, which are the ACCA chorus committee, and the production committee. So that's, for example, based on the contract that I most recently worked. Again, think of what contract you're working, think of the type of work that you do, and look at those committees and those chairs and loop them all in on that email. Talking of staff, staff is business reps and field reps, and they make suggestions to the bargaining team based on what they hear from members. A reminder, patterns stand out. The more people they have contacting them, the more likely that issue is going to be reflected in the change that the bargaining team ends up seeking at the bargaining table. You can always email Equity's executive team and senior staff as well, but be considerate and respectful of their time. Be strategic. If it's a huge issue, go ahead and run it up the chain. But if it's contractual, honestly, it's smarter to focus that on the people who actually handle that change and handle those committees, as opposed to emailing executive team and senior staff. And finally, another option to getting involved is that you can be a part of the change. One way you can do that is you can make and submit a proposal for something you specifically want to see change within a contract. That's why understanding where contract is contractually right now for the contract that you're working will help. The most successful proposals involve an understanding of where the contract currently is. For example, changing language that already exists in a contract is usually easier, talking about bargaining capital, in my own personal experience being on a bargaining team, than it is to create and get a brand new concept within a contract. Proposals don't have to be written in contract language if that's what feels intimidating to you. You can have a proposal idea that's just a concept. Write it down. Write it down to the best of your ability, and don't be afraid to pass it along. I think we make ourselves small by thinking that our ideas aren't big enough. Again, that imposter syndrome is creeping in, to put forward. Trust your experience working your contract. Trust you have a solid understanding of what you want to see change, and your own lived experience is valid enough. That is great. Put that idea forward. You can do that in contract language or your best attempt at it. You can do it in solid written language that you think is good. You can do it in just a concept by saying, I think we work too many 5-show weekends. Just coming back to that as an example. We should only be able to work 2 consecutive months of 5-show weekends before we have to have a schedule change. Whatever, that might be a nightmare because schedule changes are also an issue, but that's an example. If you have an idea for a change to a contract, you're going to send that to the committee chair. Any applicable committee chairs that might apply to the concept that you're wanting to see change. For example, if you're a stage manager working, let's say, a touring agreement, you're going to send that idea to not only the touring committee chair or chairs if there's more than one, but also the stage manager committee chair. The more directions that apply to that change that you can send that in, the more people hear the need for that change, the more people talk about the need for that change, and the more likely it is to be a part of the change. Another idea you can do is you can lobby committee members. So committees are made up of people working or who have worked those contracts. If you observe a committee meeting, you might be able to see who's on a committee. And if there's people on there who you hear talking about the same types of change that you want to see, it's a great idea to reach out to those people and say, hey, this is something that I think should change. Can you help me talk about that within this committee? They might say no, they might say yes. Just an idea. We're stronger together, and that's where organizing helps. Be creative. Really, I want to challenge us to engage our blue sky thinking. What do we want to see change in our contracts? Just because something has been the way it's been for years does not mean that's a reason for it to stay that way. If you have an idea, I want to challenge you to give yourself permission to bring it forward. Odds are people want to hear it. You can also get involved by joining a group. And I'm going to talk about the various types of groups within Actors Equity Association that you can be a part of. There are committees, there are equity communities, there are action teams, and there are rapid response teams. Committees carry out the work of the association, each focusing on particular aspects of union business like policy and contracts. This is why I've talked about committees the most. Committees are essentially responsible for discussing the changes within either that contract or that field of work. There are national and regional contract committees that oversee contracts. Non-contract committees, like the media one that I previously mentioned, they propose recommendations on specific topics to council. You can serve on up to 5 committees. To be on a contract committee, you have to have either worked that contract or have been engaged as a non-professional by an employer using that contract. And here's a reminder again that these intersect. What type of work do you do? There's probably a committee for that. What contract have you worked? There's a committee for that. Is there an area of interest that's really specific to you? Are you really passionate about media and new technology? Are you really passionate about preventing harassment in hostile work environments? Those are committees. Think about what you're passionate about. Check out the committees that exist. Equity communities bring together members based on shared interests, demographics, and other commonalities. Their goal is to build community via educational and social networking opportunities. They are, for example, identity-based and job category-based, and also regionally based. You can join as many communities as you like, but they're not the groups that are handling contract changes and policy and union business. It's more community-based. There are action teams. Action teams provide members opportunities to be involved in focused activities to work toward a cause, such as, for example, the Member Education and Engagement Action Team. This team helps educate members and future members about the ins and outs of equity. Are you really passionate about growing member engagement? That might be a team for you. There are rapid response teams, and these bring together equity members to work on equity issues that they care about. They're designed to act quickly when opportunities come up. So this might be like for job actions or for public policy. If you want to get involved, there's a few more ways too. You can join a bargaining team. If you're interested in joining a bargaining team, committees are a good pathway in. Bargaining teams are essentially chosen by the chairs of the committee for the corresponding contract and approved by council or the governing board. Like, for example, the Eastern Regional Board approves the bargaining team for the NEAT contract, which is the New England Area Theater contract, because that contract is governed by the Eastern Regional Board. But essentially, if you're interested in joining a bargaining team, look at the contract committee for that contract and reach out to those committee chairs. You can run for council yourself. And something we can all do is report emergencies or rule breaks. If you're working a contract and you think something is breaking a rule, even if you don't know, report it. I always call equity. And if it's outside of business hours, I call the emergency line if it's performance-related emergency. If it's not an emergency, I call the equity line, but I always call and I always email business reps and any field reps who might need to be on that email. For example, a member safety field rep if it is a safety issue. You can find how to find all of the emergency numbers, the hotline for bullying, harassment, and intimidation by checking out the manual that I made. And here's a reminder too. If you are not working a contract and you are an equity member, you still deserve to be protected in audition spaces. Call the regional office to communicate an issue. If you think an audition is breaking audition rules, remember there are rules for every contract about auditions in the collective bargaining agreements. Report to equity. Odds are it might take longer than you like for someone to get back to you, and if we want things to change, we have to be reporting them because staff is logging issues, staff is tracking issues, and patterns will continue to stand out when it comes time for bargaining teams to go to the table. It also creates data for staff and our union to point to say, look, this happened 12 times. Look, this happened at 17 shows. Look, this happened 13 times at this show throughout the year. We have to have the data that we need to fight the fights we need to fight, and you are a part of helping our union get that by communicating with our union. So, if all of this is overwhelming, I hear you. I understand. It was overwhelming to me too at first, and it still is a little overwhelming to talk about it all. Take one thing that feels accessible to you from this episode and start there. It will grow and grow. Your understanding is honestly going to grow quicker than you think. I didn't start getting involved by understanding everything about our union. I still don't. And I think it's likely impossible for someone to know everything about our union at all. But you begin by leaning into the areas you specifically are interested in. Don't try to force yourself to be interested in something you're not, but if something's pulling at you and you're interested in it, lean in that direction and see what happens. I've met so many people who will totally willingly offer themselves up to answer questions, to point you in the direction that you want to go, to find answers if they don't have them and share those with you. But we have to ask for that help. We have to take those people up on the help that they offer. So take one thing here and try it. Attend one council meeting or one committee meeting for the type of the work that you do. See what your elected reps are doing and saying. Ask for a friend to attend a meeting with you and then talk about it together. Email a business rep when you would normally shrug something off and roll your eyes and just say, I guess that's just the way it is, or my union won't do anything about it, because that's how we change things. And if you get stuck or run into something you can't seem to find the answer to along the way, which is inevitably going to happen, ask someone. Check out my manual for how to contact staff, how to find anything we've talked about today on the member portal, and how to ask your questions. I genuinely want to offer myself up as a resource. I clearly love helping people find pathways for the change they're wanting to see. I will probably all too happily point you in the right direction or do as much as I can to search for the answer that you're looking for. But you have to be the first one to decide to move past step one, to move past just recognizing something's wrong, and to take action into your own hands and choose your next step forward. Our union is genuinely only as strong as its members, so let's make it even stronger than it currently is. And on behalf of myself and everyone else in our union, thank you for being interested and making our work better. Thank you so much for joining me again today. I'm so thrilled you're here. Check out Assembly Guide on Instagram and follow or subscribe for upcoming episodes. If this wasn't your speed and your speed is more, I don't really want to be involved with equity, but I do still want to know how to have my voice heard by our union. Stay tuned for my next episode because I've got a short, quick how-to episode just for you. Have a topic in mind about creating more humane theatrical spaces that you'd like to discuss or hear me talk about? Reach out to me directly at assemblyguidepodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you, truly. And if you've got someone in mind you think I should connect with to celebrate and highlight the awesome work that they're doing to make our theater industry more humane, please let me know. Till next time, thanks for joining me on this journey towards change. See you soon.